Welcome to the latest edition of Russia Unmasked from the Center for Russian Studies in Kyiv, in which we challenge propaganda published by the Kremlin against Ukraine and offer Ukrainian perspectives and responses. My name is Tony Meehan. I'm based in London. As you know, Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has been going on for more than 1,400 days, with an estimated 1.2 million Russian military dead or wounded. First, a prayer for Ukraine. Long may she survive, endure and prevail this Russian aggression. In this episode, we share reports of false claims of missile attacks against Putin, US President changes sides again and again, planned Russian interference in potential Ukrainian elections, and closing with a Russian allegation that Zelensky is working to destroy the US and Russia peace deal. It has been reported in London's Telegraph newspaper that following the US President's first conversation with Vladimir Putin, he supported Russia's position. However, in his second call with Putin after his meeting with President Zelensky, the US President had changed his position in support of Ukraine. Russia's response, 24 hours later, was to accuse Ukraine of attacking Putin's residence. This was followed by Russian threats and a rebuke from the US President of President Zelensky and Ukraine. Going back a little bit, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov claimed that Ukraine carried out an overnight drone attack on the residence of Russian leader Vladimir Putin and said that this would lead to a revision of Russia's negotiating position. And he also said that these actions would not go unanswered, and that both the targets and the timing of Russia's retaliatory strikes have already been decided by the armed forces. At the same time, Russian leader Vladimir Putin said Russia will continue to follow the directions of Russia's general staff while carrying out tasks of the special military operation. Two important points here. Putin positioned the responsibility for the retaliation and the continuation of its war against Ukraine onto the Russian general staff, away from himself. He refers to it as a special military operation as opposed to war, and therefore he again washes his hands virtually of the whole thing. At the same time, the Kremlin had a voice, and it said that Donald Trump had adjusted his approach to Ukraine and to President Zelensky. This followed the reports of the attempted drone attack on one of the Russian leader's residence. Interesting that the Kremlin refers to it as an attempted drone attack, whereas the previous statement said it was a definite attack. Needless to say, it has been rejected and repudiated by Ukraine and Zelensky. US President, quote again, the Kremlin quote, is the US President was shocked by this report, literally outraged. He could not imagine such insane actions and was said that this will undoubtedly affect Americans' approach to working with Zelensky. Russia's position will be revised, arguing that Moscow had no alternative but to rethink and rethink and rethink. So Russia's influence over Trump over a fake attack has been achieved. Trump criticized Zelensky for the alleged attack on Putin's residence, conveniently forgetting that almost 4 years of Russian attacks on thousands of Ukrainian homes, killing thousands of Ukrainians, it was totally irrelevant. But just one alleged phony attack against a residence where probably Putin was not there. It was a convenience, and it really doesn't matter that the building was damaged or destroyed by a phony attack because he knew all about it. Anyway, in response, President Zelensky has said that the Russians were dissatisfied, and this makes sense if you think about this. The Russians were dissatisfied with the successful meeting between the Ukrainian and American sides in the United States and are inventing reasons to carry out strikes on government buildings in Kyiv. I would actually say more than that, but we'll come on to that later. Another lie by Russia. This is Zelensky. It is clear that yesterday we had a meeting with the US president, and it wasn't good for the Russians. There is no scandal between America and Ukraine, and instead we have progressed. That is a failure for Russia. They do not want to end this war. They are capable of ending it only under pressure. And so they were looking for, I'm convinced of this, reasons that they are moving further towards war. Now, with this statement about a resident being attacked, they are simply preparing the ground to strike the capital and properly government buildings. I think there's more to it. They wanted to destroy the Zelensky-Trump talks and any agreements that were made there that were acceptable to those parties. They also allows them to justify changing their negotiation position, which means rejecting the offer. It justifies in their mind, and they believe the public's mind, that they can return to missile attacks on Zelensky and other Ukrainian leaders by first accusing Ukraine of imaginary attacks on Russian leaders, and therefore they have the right to retaliate. As I said, they failed to confirm where he was. Our next story for this edition is an alleged Russian interference in Ukraine future elections. President Zelensky said that Russian authorities have been making preparations to ensure that Ukrainian citizens in Russia and the occupied territories can take part in Ukrainian elections or referendum. I just think about that for a minute, and as to whether or not you would trust any of the results coming out of Russia or even the occupied territories. This is a quote by President Zelensky. "It is important that observers are present everywhere. This morning, he received a briefing from the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine, telling him that Russia had already set the task of doing everything they can to ensure that Ukrainians who are in the territory of Russia, as well as Ukrainians who are in temporarily Russian-controlled areas of Ukraine, can vote. The reason they're doing this is clear: to keep on raising the issue that a large number of people live there and they have a right to vote, so that afterwards can say it does not recognize these elections." Makes sense? As you can see, Russia doesn't care how it gets its message across, and that Ukrainian authorities are illegitimate. I'm constantly saying this. Again, I'm quoting Zelensky. He is constantly saying this, that Russia itself is illegitimate. So it will produce corresponding messages about the illegitimacy of Ukrainian authorities. Ukraine would submit a 20-point peace agreement for ratification by Parliament or hold nationwide referendum, or both, and may also decide elections at the same time as a referendum. If one was to take an honesty check, I would believe President Zelensky before Lavrov or Putin or anybody else there. Final example for this episode is a Dateline Moscow story that was published in TASS, the Kremlin-aligned news agency. And it's another example of Russian propaganda. At this time it comes from the lips of the Russian military commander Abti Olodinov. The headline is "Zelensky works to prevent peace deal." And you have got a mirror image here of the rejection of the Russian plan and the Russian rejection of the Ukrainian plan. Lieutenant General Abti Olodinov, this is his title, which is typical Russian, Deputy Chief of the Russian Armed Forces, Main Military Political Department, and Commander of the Akhmet Special Forces Unit. Vladimir Zelensky is taking, I'm quoting, every possible measure to keep Russia and Ukraine from coming to peace. That's a bold statement. Zelensky is essentially doing everything in his power to ensure that a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine is not reached. Outwardly, he does not refuse negotiations to avoid angering the United States. Simultaneously, he puts forward points that are fundamentally unacceptable to our state, i.e. Russia. According to his plan, none of the goals that they have set at the start of their special military operation will be achieved. Yes, Ukraine does not wish to become a satellite or an area of Russia. in the new Russian Empire. Volodymyr stated that Zelensky's goal is to placate the United States, but at the same time propose conditions he knows Russia cannot accept. Honesty check for you. This statement is primarily for the domestic Russian market, I believe. There is little truth or evidence that Zelensky is blocking a peace between Russia and Ukraine. He is rejecting the Russian proposals, but that doesn't block peace, because peace can actually be achieved by Putin at the stroke of a pen immediately. Allow me to offer the following observations for your consideration. As the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky has the duty, responsibility to lead his country's defence and the protection of its citizens and borders against foreign invasion and aggression. Secondly, the Ukrainian President and his democratically elected parliament have studied the proposed Russian peace plan, which they have rejected due to its territorial demands and expectations, the limitation of its military forces, and the omission to guarantee future security, and much, much more. The next point is the accusation of rejection of the Russian plan is reflected by the Russian general, who states the Ukrainian counter-proposal is totally unacceptable. It's a mirror image. Finally, Putin, whilst allegedly working to end the war, has announced it is his ambition to achieve all of the primary objectives, which would result in the assimilation of Ukraine into the new Russian Putin Empire. QED, that's it. So from all of us here at the Centre in Kyiv, thank you. Please share this podcast with your friends and those who you think will be interested. The online address is Russia Unmasked at YouTube. We'll be back with more news from Kyiv soon. Until then, Slav Ukraini. Ukrainians were, are, and always will be here. Volodymyr Zelensky. Thank you very much.